My back is absolutely killing today. Perhaps it's from all the talent that I'm carrying. Or perhaps it's because I sleep like a skydiver who forgot his parachute. Probably the second one. At long last, we have made it to the final episode in this series. You already know how I feel about it. Talked about it last time. Ready to be done, so let's just get into it. First and foremost, I had to do a few little touch-ups on the enclosure itself, particularly the lid, which I hadn't really done any cleanup work with after I cut it down, so there were a lot of little holes and gaps in there that needed filling in, and then the filler needed sanding down. The whole thing needed a new coat of paint because it was just... ugh. I also relocated that hinge because I know how much it was bothering some of you. It only took me 6 months to get around to it. At least it's done now, okay? So you can continue living in peace. And then I had to silicone seal the base of the enclosure. The reason I do this is to stop any liquid and any bedding as well from getting in the gaps between where the two pieces of wood meet. Liquid is the main issue because the outer part of the wood is made from a material that's completely waterproof, but if the liquid gets underneath to the raw material, it can end up swelling up and damaging or sometimes completely destroying the enclosure. That's less likely because hamsters don't produce a huge amount of urine, but at the very least, if you want your enclosures to last a long time, make sure you silicone in the bottom. It's a 10-minute job. It will save you years. The best and safest silicone to use is aquarium or terrarium silicone. The brand itself does not matter. I've always used the same one just because it's what's locally available. But what matters is that it's made for using in animal enclosures. That way you know it's pet safe. And if it's an aquarium one, it's also very water resistant, so it'll last a long time. Little tip when it comes to siliconing: place some masking tape or some painter's tape about 1 centimeter away from where you want to silicone on both sides. That way when you wipe around with a damp cloth or a damp finger, whichever way you like to do it, to smooth the silicone out, you don't run the risk of the silicone getting really messy and spread all on the inside of your enclosure. It will stop at the line where the masking tape is, and then make sure you pull the masking tape up before the silicone has a chance to dry. If you wait until after it's dried, you run the risk of pulling the silicone back up and then you have to do the whole thing again. So tape, silicone, remove the tape, leave it to dry. So with the patching, sanding, painting, siliconing, and the relocation of the bracket done, the last thing this enclosure needed was a great big sheet of glass. I hate glass. I don't hate glass. I've got nothing against glass. Glass is fine. It's sand with a job, but I hate handling glass. I am absolutely terrified of breaking it. I learned this when we were building the Detolf many, many years ago, which, by the way, have you seen how much the Detolf prices have gone up? It's 85 euros. I swear that thing used to cost 69.99. Am I wrong there? How much has it gone up? Anyway, irrelevant. When we built the Detolf, that's just 3 sheets of glass and 2 bits of wood on it. Terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. This was just 1 sheet of glass, but it was one very big sheet of glass. 121 by 60 centimeters and 5 millimeters thick, because it didn't need to be that thick, but I live with a dog that has a very long, waggy, flappy, happy tail, and if you've ever lived with a dog with a very long, waggy, flappy, happy tail, you know how powerful those things are. And he has actually broken glass with it before. It was much, much thinner glass. It was on the front of that dig box thing that you may remember, made years ago. I had that just sitting out, lying around, not doing anything in particular, and his tail caught the front of it, and it just shattered. He was perfectly fine. He didn't even notice he'd done anything, but I will not take any risks. So I got a fairly thick piece of glass, which means it was also on the heavier side. Not super heavy, but heavy enough that I was even more nervous handling it than I would normally be. I even put down a carpet in front of the enclosure while I was installing this, just in case. I don't know what I thought it would do if I dropped the glass. If I somehow thought that this tiny, thin, cheap carpet was gonna save it or something. Luckily though, I did not drop the glass. I was able to successfully install it into the enclosure, and the way I installed it was actually not just by plonking it straight on the front, which is something I've done before when working with smaller sheets of glass, which don't terrify me quite as much. When I was building the Billy XL, also known as the Petri dish, I didn't use any brackets or anything to support the glass. It's just held in purely by the silicone itself, and that worked out just fine, but I didn't want to take the risk this time. To support the glass from the outside of the enclosure, I used small L brackets, and in an attempt to make them look a little less obvious, I spray painted them white. It did nothing to help with that. They're just there. You can either have security or aesthetics. You can't have both. Maybe you can have both. People with more talent and more money can have both. I can't have both. One little thing with these brackets though is that where the metal has been bent, there is this little lump that prevented the bracket from sitting flush against the wood. So to solve that problem, I carved a hole into the side of my cage. Carved out a divot with my craft knife, and then that little lump sat inside, allowing the bracket to sit flush against the wood and support the glass properly. In total, I used 7 of these brackets, 2 on each of the outer walls, 1 at the top and 1 close to the bottom, and then along the base I used 3, 1 in the center and 2 at either end. I also wanted to add a tiny bit of support on the inside of the enclosure, and this was mostly just to help keep the glass in place while the silicone was setting so that it didn't fall over and smash. And I kept this relatively simple by cutting a few rounds off a circular dowel, drilling a hole through the center, and then just screwing those behind. I had 3 of them. I screwed 2 behind the upper 2 brackets on the outside walls, and I also put 1 behind the middle bracket on the base of the enclosure. And I made sure to leave a 5mm space between the bracket and the round of wood so the glass could slide in between the 2 of them. Now it's finally time to add the glass. Immediately before installing the glass, I ran a line of silicone across the base because obviously the weight of the glass meant that that was just gonna shove down on there and I wouldn't be able to get any silicone underneath it afterwards. Shove down on there. I couldn't have found a better sentence. No, I can't even. I'm giving myself time to come up with one and redo that line, and I can't think of anything. Shove down on there it is. I also removed the 2 upper brackets from either side of the wall so I didn't have to lift the glass too high to slide it down, because I knew if I did that it would definitely end up dropping it and probably killing myself. And then I very, very carefully put the glass into place in the enclosure and reattached the brackets. And nothing broke, nobody was injured, nothing was harmed, nothing went wrong. And then of course I needed to do more siliconing because all of the edges needed siliconing. So I'd already taped up the glass before I put it. That's another tip if you're working with a huge piece of glass. Put the masking tape on the inside of the glass before you move it, because it's just easier that way. Same deal though, ran the silicone up the edges of the glass and also along the bottom, wiped it as per the instructions on the bottle, removed the tape, left it to dry, and that was it. It was done, finished, complete, and not one single thing went wrong. Spot the difference? I'm an idiot edition. On this side of the cage, the lid sits perfectly flush because I cut the wall at the right height. And on this side of the cage, I did exactly not that thing. Incredible. Are you eating the wood shavings? They're not edible. I mean, they may be edible. I'm not sure, actually. Should look into that. But don't do it. Oh no, what's happening? I'm being haunted by the ghost of merchandise that happens to be available in my store at hamsterpie.com. You should come and check it out sometime. I was gonna do a proper merch plug for it, but I kind of lost track of time. That's the best I got. I promise the merch ads will be better in the future. I will try harder. Finally, it's time to do the full setting up of the enclosure. This is, I suppose, the most exciting part of all of it, because this is the whole thing coming together, everything that we've made over the last few months. I say we like you've had any involvement. Aside from cheering me on from the sidelines and mocking me, which I appreciate, keeps my ego from getting too high. Whether or not all that hard work has been worth it will be entirely determined by what you guys think of the final setup. So, you know, no pressure.
Until something better came along.
I decided not to do a long-winded narrative while I was setting up the enclosure because I figured you guys have just seen me make all of this stuff, well, not all of the stuff, but like 90% of the stuff in this enclosure, so you've already seen it, you know what it is. Do I really need to go into detail about it again? It feels a bit repetitive. However, if you are new to the channel and you haven't seen the series of me building all the things for this enclosure, the entire playlist will be linked up in the cards above this video. Have I pointed to the right side? I can't remember. Up here somewhere, click that thing. You know the subscribe button used to be up there? Long time ago, like 10 years. It used to be yellow as well. Anyone remember that? Totally irrelevant to anything I'm saying, but it's just a moment of nostalgia. For those who are curious about the substrate I've used, it's a mixture of safe wood shavings, meadow hay, and homemade tissue bedding. Each layer of substrate has been carefully compacted down, and the reason for doing this, and also the reason for using a mixture of substrates, is to help with the structural integrity of any burrows or tunnels that get built. I don't know if I'm going to be doing a dedicated tour video for this setup. Again, I don't know if there's much point because you guys already know most of the stuff that's in it, but if that is something you want to see, please feel free to let me know and I'll be happy to make it. I could also just do an informal, like semi-detailed tour of it in my next vlog, if that's something you prefer. It's up to you. And I guess that's it for this series and this video. Now all the enclosure needs is somebody to live in it. Oh, wait a minute.